Hello and welcome to a new episode of Injury Time with me, Sandeep and Brad, as always. Usually, we always start the season with sort of a preview between the two of us, and we are continuing the same this time as well. Brad, thank you so much for doing this so bright and early in the morning. We are recording this.
Oh, it's perfect. It's the best time of the mornings.
Yes, get your work done early, they say, right? So let's jump right into this preview. We are trying to do this quite quickly because we don't want it to be too long. So let's start with Mohun Bagan, who, like we said the last some time ago, probably the best club now in terms of success, in terms of money, in terms of all those things, but looking rather out of sorts coming into the season.
Yeah, I think it's. You look at the performance. I would say the performance has been half decent in the AFC competition as well as in the Durand Cup. And then what I mean by that is, they keep the ball well. They try and play the way Juan Fernando's teams typically play, and he wants them to play. But I think the criticism which everyone's at is, look, all that passing, it's sideways, it's backwards, and there's very little in the final third, and you're relying on individual brilliance. But I think that's where, I would say that they have the trump cards because they have individual brilliance in that squad. You've got the likes of Hugo Bumus, you've got the likes of Ashik now, you've got Dimi Petratos, who I think is going to be crucial to them. And I think Yoni Kauka is brilliant. Wherever you play him, he's brilliant. And the trick I think that the coach is going to have is how do you find that balance? Which players do you play to get that balance to give you an attack and make sure that you still keep that style of play and dominance of the ball. And I think the other huge factor, which a lot of people underestimate, and this is going to come into forte this year because of fans are back, is look, you can get away with playing badly, keeping the ball and not scoring. You keep the ball possession, and you're at Salt Lake. That's nowhere. So how the coach and the players deal with that, I think that's going to, and I think then they can go all the way.
You mentioned Salt Lake. Another team that is going to be playing there is East Bengal. They have probably done better considering how they used to do in the previous seasons. So how do you look at their team? They've got Constantine coming in, who knows the Indian market and the Indian players really well, the Indian mentality, even the clubs for that matter. Signed Clayton Silva also, I think, and Ivan as well, VP Suhair. So how do you look at that team? Not looks better than the previous iterations of the teams.
I mean, we've said it. I think you and I have said this before. I mean, others have probably disagreed with us, but I think look, Constantine knows what he's doing. He's a very, very astute coach. We've seen that with India. We've seen that with any of the teams that he's had in the past, wherever he's been. That he's pragmatic. He doesn't come in with like too much of like philosophy of how he's going to play and give it like some of the coaches from the Iberian Peninsula come up with. And he knows what the strengths of the players are because he knows Indian football very well. He knows which players will perform for him, and given that he's typically worked with limited resources, whether it's early on in his career, whether it's Nepal, Malawi, India, wherever he's been, he knows how to get the best with little resources. And let's see, Bengal, I'd say little resources in terms of Indian players because a lot of the top talent's been locked in at other clubs. But he's got players like the ones you mentioned that can do a job for them. And to then add players with ISL experience, Ivan Gonzalez, Clayton Silva, Lima, those are players who are going to help just give him that stability and the way he needs to play. I think they'll be very difficult to beat, which a lot of his teams always are. So maybe they'll grind out 1-0s, grind out results. But you got goal scorers in that squad, both Indian and foreign goal scorers. And I think in the ISL, if you can keep it tight to the back and you can nick a goal here or there, you've seen the likes of Jamshedpur, you've seen other teams in the past that you can go all the way, whether it's Habas's teams or that. It doesn't have to be one way of playing. The alternative way of doing it is actually quite effective in the ISL. So I think there'll be dark horses, and I'd almost say because it's top 6 this year, not top 4, I'd actually put my money on them making top 6.
I mean, this top 6 things, I'm not a fan, I have to say. I get why they did it, but I'm not a fan because it's more than 50% people in the knockouts. It's ridiculous.
from a punditry point of view and all this kind of view, it's great because then you can easily make predictions. You can say, yeah, they'll be top 6. So, you know, it's a chance of being right. And in the last couple of years, less pressure on somebody to go back to this video and say, you said this. In the last couple of years, I think we've normally got 3 out of 4 right.
Yeah, because there's always one
been
outlier.
wild card last year. Yeah, there's an outlier like FC Goa not making it or not making it. So I think with top 6, it's easy to just say, just chuck a few names more often than you'll be right.
Yeah. So now, since you mentioned FC Goa, we'll go there. They've got a new coach, an old player who's come back as a new coach, a fresh coach. They signed Vasquez, Sadawi, Valiente, Arnaud. They've gone a little away from the usual signing pattern that they usually go with. How do you look at that team and that future? Because again, I am not sure how strong their Indian contingent is.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to watch them play a couple of times. I saw them play against Jamshedpur. I saw them play recently against Dempo, and mixed bag. I'd say. I think it's still a work in progress. I think the way they're trying to evolve as a team, but you've got proven players. I mean, even though it's not a typical FC Goa thing to sign a player who's with another club like talent, Mumbai or somebody else would take them off of them. But I think Vasquez is someone they've tracked for a while. He's their philosophy, style of play, and I think he could be crucial to them. But some of their foreign signings look very impressive, and I think when you've got the likes of Brandon, you've got Anwar Ali, you've got Seriton, you've got a pretty decent core, Glenn Martins, of Indian players as well. Devendra's come along nicely. So I think they've got a pretty strong core, and they've been together for a while. Goalkeeping, as usual, big question mark in that team, and it always is. So I think it's crucial about how they play defensively, whether they can. I think there's definitely they'll be difficult team to play against because they have an attack, especially the new signings. I think they're very exciting. But the concern would be, at the back, can they be tight? And they always unearth one young Indian player coming through the ranks. So I think they've got some good youngsters coming through as well. Who could
I mean, they have to. They will be under pressure, right? Ravi made no qualms about it. He said there is pressure to deliver because of how the last season went.
Yeah, I think sometimes in football you need pressure. If you have that pressure, you're more likely to perform as opposed to complacency can set in. But I think last year no one expected a top 9. They had all the problems, obviously, with coach leaving after the start and that unsettlement. So I think they've learned from that. You've heard they're looking for bigger personalities, and having a coach who knows the club inside out, that certainly should help. So I think they'll be forced to reckon with. The only thing I would say that's could hinder them is because of this Women's World Cup going on in Goa, they don't have their first matches at home. So it's crucial that if they can pick up points on the road in the beginning, then by the time they start coming home, it should be, you've got a long stretch of home games. And so it could work to their advantage, it could work the other way. So that's the only sort of, you would say, a little asterisk that you'd put against them.
Yes, absolutely. Talking about another team under pressure, Bengaluru FC. They seem to have spent good money, made some big statement signings. I think one of the signings that people are not talking about is Pradhyum Das and how good he could potentially be. New coach as well, going back to the roots of English coach. So how do you look at the whole thing? And won the Duran Cup as well.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. I said, I don't think there's that much pressure now because you've already got a trophy in the cabinet. If you look at it last year as well, I mean, FC Goa, people say it wasn't a good season. They won the Durand Cup, so it's not all doom and gloom. So, but is that a sign? The team that wins the Durand Cup, as it is last season in the ISL, sometimes it can happen. When you win it happened to us at BFC when we won the Fed Cup before the I-League started, and then we didn't win the league that year. And we actually had a poor start to it. So there can be a little bit of a celebration hangover at times. When you've done that with players, a little bit of complacency. But I think where it helps them is when you've got this shift in style. You've gone from, Roca played a certain way, then Carlos had a different way, and then Marco certainly was different. And now you've got Grayson coming in with his style. At least they've had time to gel. I think Marco didn't have that. It was straight thrown into the ISL, and it was like, all right, this is how it's going to be. And I think he needed more time. Now they've got a system, they've got a style, and I think he's recruited players to suit his way of playing. So having the Roy Krishnas in there, having your Prabir Das in there, I think if you look at net what they've gained versus what they've lost, I think you'd have to say it's a positive. Like Clayton Silva for Roy Krishna, probably on par. If you look at the look at the stats, I think Roy Krishna will probably deliver a little bit more, and he's better suited, I think, for the coach's style of play than Clayton would have been. I think Prabir is an upgrade on Satak, if you're talking about from a right back perspective. Definitely more experienced, more versatile. You can play on either right or left back. You can play further forward. Yeah, better crosses. Hira Mondal is an upgrade on Ajit Kumar in terms of he's a genuine left back, equally inexperienced, but he's on the up curve, you could say. Sandesh Jingan for the floors or whatever is still a massive upgrade on Pratik Chaudhary, and so that's a no-brainer. Alexander Jovanovic, I think, is better than Musafa in terms of what he offers them, especially position-wise, and I think he's a better defender than Musafa King. So definite upgrades. I think the only one you could say was a loss would probably be Ashik. It's tough to replace a player like Ashik, but given the way Ashik was used at BFC as a left back and out of position, if it means now somebody like Shivasakti is going to play a few more minutes, I think Shivasakti will probably get better returns in terms of goals and assists than Ashik delivered. So at the end of the day, it's about goals and assists and all that kind of stuff. Nobody's going to look back at Ashik's work rate at BFC and whatever he did. You're going to look at those. So I think that's where I think if you look at the ins and outs of that squad, I think you'd have to say they're still in the positive.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Kerala Blasters. They've retained the coach, thank God. I mean, there was no way they could let go of the coach. Luna is also there. He had some personal tragedies, but he's come back. They've lost the two attackers that made them so threatening last season. So how do you look at that team this year, especially with the fans back in the stands? I think along with BFC, probably Kerala Blasters and the West Bengal clubs are the ones who lost the most in terms of fans.
It's a good question. Did they lose or did they gain? I mean, obviously, pure numbers, not having fans is a problem and all that. But that pressure, what I mean by that is a pressure. Kerala Blasters, when you're playing at home, if you have a poor start, game's not going your way, fans can sometimes, it works two ways. It can be to your advantage when you're playing well, but when you're not, it's detrimental. So not having that pressure, and it's only sort of social media where when you're in a bubble that you have to deal with it. They're arguably one of their best seasons, Kerala Blasters last year. Now, expectations even higher now. So when you go into a packed stadium on the first day, on Friday, the expectation is you're just going to go there and on paper, they would say that they should beat East Bengal. But, it's not going to be as straightforward as that. I think, look, it's great that they retained the coach. He was brilliant, and it's about time that we start seeing at Kerala Blasters continuity with coaching staff. It's been a long time since they've had that. I think the other one that is a really crucial retention, and you talk about the loss of forward, but I think having Leskovic there is key. He was massive in terms of keeping that solidity at the back and the relationship he was starting to develop with Hormipam and the other, and with Cabra and at the back. I think they're pretty solid at the back, and that's the platform that you need to build from. Good goalkeeper, good back four, and then I'll actually agree with the sort of Kerala management and some of the coaching staff, because I've heard chatter about Vasquez wasn't that big a loss, because you look at the numbers, he didn't really score that many goals for the price tag, for the 9 that he was, and all the hype about it. Someone saying he's going to be the best signing in the league. Look, if you had goalkeepers who know how to do their job, he wouldn't have even got those goals that he did. I mean, keep going on about that goal from the halfway line. It was like any half-decent goalkeeper would have saved that. So you don't get the highlights thing. So there's a lot of spectacular goals that were scored. No doubt. I mean, that volley was stunning, etc. But in pure numbers,
low XG goals. Right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's low XG goals. So those are not going to happen the next season. As I said, it needs a keeper fumble. So is he getting in the right areas and doing that for them, for their style of play? Probably not. I think Pereira Diaz will be a bigger loss for them because we saw it in the games when he wasn't playing last year, where it had a massive effect on the way they played. But if you're going to lose, I think it's better to lose both because they had an understanding, they played a certain way. If you had one and not the other, then you're trying to look for someone who's like-for-like replacement. Now you can go different kinds of strikers and maybe someone suited more to the way the coach wants to play, or because there's no guarantee that he wants to play the same way this year as he did last year. So I think it remains to be seen, obviously, pressure on the others, but you've got Luna there with his quality to assist, his quality to score. Any forward's going to enjoy playing with a player like that, playing in the pocket. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you spoke about Pereira Diaz. Let's talk about Mumbai City. They seem to have gone around and figured out the best player from different teams and signed them. Greg Stewart's there, Noguera is there, Diaz is there. Changte is now, I mean, he was there for the Champions League as well, but he's there. Raulin looks like he's on his way back from injury. So how does... They look like the best squad, although I know BFC beat them in the Durand Cup final, but they do look like they have the best squad for the whole run of the season.
Yeah, I think if you look overall squad strength and depth in terms of foreign players, I think it's brilliant. You've got guys like Batada Fall and you've got Jahu, and what they bring to that is, I think they've got the highest average experience of foreign players. If you look at experience in the ISL, you got guys who've been around here for 4+ years now, and with the exception of probably Edu Badia, there aren't that many who've been around in the league for that long. So that's what those two bring to the table. And obviously you've got guys who are newer to the league, the likes of Diaz and Greg Stewart, but what they do is they bring quality. Now, can they maintain that level of quality that they brought last season? Obviously in completely different styles of play, different teams, remains to be seen. But I think Des is a very, very smart coach. He knows what he's doing. He had last season to sort of look at the league and realize, okay, I've got to be a bit different. I can't just be the same as we were the previous season and expect to get results. So I think they've gone out and been smart in the foreign signings to think about who's going to adjust well to the demands of what they've got. And I like the way he uses his Indian players. I think the way he's brought on Lachenpa is doing well for them. And I think Rahul Baker is going to be crucial once again. Vikram Pratap's come a long way since Des Bucknam's come in, and Gurkir is getting little opportunities as well. So those players that he's bringing into the system, the Indian players, are also going to have an impact. And Roland coming back from injury is almost like a new signing. That for me was one of the players that they missed the most last season. The trick again for them is whenever you recruit well and you've got such a squad, it's finding that balance. With the foreigners, I think where you're going to play Greg Stewart and Noguera as well as Jahu, because you're probably expecting Fal has to play or Royston Griffiths, one of the two foreigners is going to play, and Diaz is going to play. So that balance, I think, is going to be the trick. And again, because Pereira Diaz isn't necessarily prolific in that, so can Greg Stewart deliver the same number of goals? If not, will Chante and Bipin contribute together at least double digits in goals and assists? So I think you'd want Bipin and Chante and Vikram Pratap, or whoever's playing in those positions, they've got to give you the same kind of output combined, like 3 or 4 Indian lads giving you what Greg Stewart gave Jamshedpur last year, because Greg Stewart's going to be a marked man. It's not going to be, last year there was no one knew much about him, no one done enough homework, I guess, and he picked up positions and hurt people. This year I think it won't be as easy for him.
Yeah, and I also am very looking forward to the goalkeeping situation they have over there, because I still don't think, I think for him Purba is the number one. Although Nawaz is on big money, but he's bought in the goalkeeper from Rajasthan. It seems like there might be a fight over there for that position, which I'm really looking forward to. I still don't think their wing backs are as good as they could be, because they were hurt a lot playing on the wings last year. So let's see if they can figure that out. And I want to ask about Chennai again. Another reason they have Bradarich. I hope I'm not butchering his name. He is a new coach. They managed to retain Thapa, which I think is great. So how do you look at them? Again, not the most uh, easy team to predict, because of the way they go with the foreign signings and the Indian players and stuff.
Yeah, I think every year they just sort of roll the dice, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and it appears that there's no sort of logic to some of the signings, or what you'd call normal footballing logic. And the foreign players, I mean, remains to be seen. Obviously, if the coach has had a lot of impact with him, he's brought one player that he worked with before. So definitely foreign players, I wouldn't have too many doubts about it, because even I think over the past they've had decent foreign players. Even last year, I thought Damjanovic was a great, one of the best centre backs in the league last year. Just the rest of it didn't click, and they still had good foreign players last year. Even some of the previous season as well. There were players which other clubs probably would sign. I think the Rafa Crevillaro saga has ended finally, which is good, because I think that uncertainty, will he play, will he not play, is he injured, and will he contribute defensively to the team, all that. And coming in as a new coach, you want your players who play your style. So I think that's a plus. I think the Indian player recruitment of new players is a bit, it looks a bit, I don't know, it just doesn't seem right. There seem to be a lot of players coming from a particular region, and certain players with a former pile and arrow sort of history. So it's hard to question whether, what's the logic behind some of those signings. And goalkeeping department, you've lost Vishal Keth. You're putting all your eggs into the basket of having goalkeepers who you wouldn't necessarily classify as number ones. So you've got a few number two goalkeepers in the squad. So that's where I'd have a little bit of concern. And at the back, but the recent result, they beat Odisha in a friendly 5-1. So obviously got decent attacking qualities in the likes of Kwame Kaikari and the others that they brought into the squad. So I think playing at home with a few more local lads as well, I think they picked up. That could help them. Romario, I think. So all of that should be a positive if they can gel together. And I'm looking forward to seeing whether Joby Justin will get any minutes. And they'll be tough to play against at home. I think the way the coach is, he knows his stuff. It's as long as you don't try and make too many sort of dramatic changes. You're not going to, in the ISL, it's still a short season. It's very difficult to completely change the way a team's going to play, but I think there were signs of it in the Durand Cup that at least he knows what he needs in his team. But I would expect them in the January window to be one of those teams that's dipping into the market to try and strengthen.
So I want to talk about Hyderabad FC now. I can't believe they have gone so far below the radar, and I apologize for that. Because they had a great season last year, but lost Ashish Rai. Obviously, they're a team that's going to always lose players, just as the way the league is. But have managed to keep the core. They've lost some foreigners also. Yunan is gone, Edu's gone, but they've got Odeona India back. So how do you look at them? Manolo is also there, which he's the key after all.
I think that last thing that you mentioned is what is key. I think the fact that you've got Manolo means you're in safe hands. Saw a little bit of them when they were here in Goa. I think they've had a pretty decent pre-season. They've slowly started to bring the newer players into it. But they've got a strong base. I mean, if you've got Sana and Ode who's played together, and so Ode I think is probably with one arm's age at the moment, and you'd have to say that's probably a little bit of an upgrade at the moment. Ja Victor's returning, who's crucial because he's versatile, can play in any position. You've got Bart returning, and I think the signings that they've got are definitely going to help them cause problems. And I think Severio's back too, isn't he? Yeah. So there's not really too many changes. I mean, Ashish Rai is definitely going to be a loss because of the way he played and the system. But I think Regan is one of those who been under the radar for a lot of clubs and just doesn't necessarily, maybe because it was Chennai, maybe because the way they were playing, didn't get the limelight that he was getting. But he's going to be crucial. And they haven't lost much apart from actually the previous Ashish in the previous season they lost Liston and they still performed well. So he knows how to get what he wants out of his players, and I think he knows the league very well. So 100% they will be contenders and up there. I mean, they will be one of the teams that will be the tough teams to beat. Again, question mark is playing in Hyderabad. At the moment, I think the ground's not ready, so they'd have to play in Pune the first game. Yeah. That is a bit disruptive because, it obviously means they haven't trained on their own home ground or got used to it. So the first few matches at the ground in Gachibowli is going to be almost like an away match for them as well. So that's the only thing. And the last time they played there, they had a terrible season under Phil Brown at Gachibowli. So hopefully things have improved in terms of the facility, the surface, etc. And that's the only thing you can see where you could be a little banana peel for them.
Let's talk about Jamshedpur. Again, someone who, my fault, again put them quite at the bottom. But I don't think they're the same team that they were last year. They've lost the coach who was the glue. They've lost Greg Stewart, who was a superstar. They have retained some players, all that. The new coach, I don't know anything about Andy Boothroyd. I hope that's how you pronounce his name. So what do you make of that team and the travel that was there yesterday? Eric Parthalu said that, this happened, and Naveen had tweeted back saying, how difficult is it when you get there one day before? So it is a question that we all have. How difficult is it if you reach there one day before in terms of travel?
It is, because it's not a straightforward travel. I mean, you fly to Ranchi, and then you got to take get on a bus or whatever transport that you're taking, and it's roughly drive through the connectivity and the flight times depending on where you're from. I remember when we were in Pune and we played Jamshedpur, I think we landed at night and had to drive through the night and got there. So it's quite disruptive in terms of...
How long is the drive?
I think it's about 4 to 6 hours, depending on what time of the day, and there's security. It's not a pleasant travel. It's something that, if you're on 3 yellow cards and one more and you're missing suspension, you're probably thinking, okay, that's the game I want to miss. But it's not a fun journey, and people there are like, oh, it's flight, is this, and it's not as straightforward, because a flight, even though it might just be an hour and a half flight from, let's say, Bangalore or from Hyderabad, the hour before you get to 2 hours before you get to the airport, the travel to the airport. If you look at door to door, so when you leave, let's say, Mumbai, and by the time you land in, or even worse, if you're a team from Goa, there is no direct flight from Goa to Ranchi. I think you probably have to go via Mumbai or via somewhere in Gujarat or somewhere we did that. So it's not, by the time you reach there, you're looking at probably sort of well over 12 hours that you've traveled, well over. Could be up to 16 to 17 hours. And I remember back in the day when I was at Shillong, it was 18 hours door to door to play a Goan team. And you'd get there a day before, but you've traveled for 18 hours and you're sat in certain positions. So it's not easy on players. There is a higher chance that you pick up hamstring injuries and all that because of the way you travel. In an ideal situation, you'll travel a few days earlier and acclimatize, but then in terms of, as in, just give your body some rest. But because of the way the schedule is, it might be easier this year to do it because it's weekend games format as opposed to much quicker. It depends where your next game is. If your previous game was in Calcutta, take the train, come down, much easier than flying and doing that. But see, this is a double-edged sword, and I realized this when I was at Shillong. It's very difficult for away teams to come to the likes of Shillong or the likes of Jamshedpur now and get points. But, so you can make, the furnace can be a fortress for you and you get your points over there. But the same token, you've also got to do away matches. So if you've got to go home and away, you'd rather go away. If you're from Jamshedpur, the Peter Hartleys and everyone else would rather go to Bangalore, play BFC, and then go straight and play Kerala or Chennai. Because that's an easier journey than to go back and then come back a week or 2 weeks later. So you can, as much as you might pick up points at home, you might start dropping a lot of points away because of that travel. So the way the schedule works out can impact it almost to the level of how a coin toss in cricket nowadays dictates who wins. So, um, but in terms of coming back to their personnel, I think having the core at the back is crucial. I think that's gives them stability at the back. And any team you look to it, AD Booker is going to build from the back. He's going to look at that strong team, the defense, Sabia, Hartley, that Ricky, that gives them the stability. I think in terms of losing Lima and adding Wellington Priori, I think Wellington was very, very good in the last time he was playing in the league. So he could be a huge impact for them in the midfield, winning second balls. And in terms of their style of play, I don't think there's going to be significant changes. The other good thing with Boothroyd is I think he's got a good history of bringing young players through. Done that at a lot of the clubs that he was at in England, and I'm surprised he ended up there and not at Odisha, because Odisha got that Watford connection, and obviously Boothroyd had the Watford connection. You'd have thought, just like how last year you'd have thought with the Rangers connection, somebody like a Greg Stewart would have ended up at BFC. But they will be tough to beat because you've got established players who played together. You've got Chima Chukwu, who knows, he did a great job for them last year. You've got another addition to that. I haven't seen much of Harry Sawyer, but you look at the other players that they've signed in, J. Emmanuel Thomas, it gives them more options in attack than they had last year. And I think the other one that's gone under the radar, a lot of people haven't spoken about, is Farooq Chaudhary coming back from injury. That's huge. So you've got a national team player who's very, very good, works his socks off. So I'm looking forward to seeing, fingers crossed, everything's 100% recovered after the injury. And Farooq, just like having thing, would be another additional. It's like having a new signing almost, and that's probably one of the massive positives for them going into the season.
So now you've given me a nice segue into Odisha FC. Joseph Gamba is coming back. They've got some good foreign signings. I'm very intrigued by the way they've gone and signed Amrinder. Obviously, Juan Fernando does not fancy him. We are that much is clear. So, how do you look at that team? Because a lot of people are saying they're the dark horse, but I just don't really see it that way.
I think they've been the dark horse over the last couple of seasons. So it's almost like that's their tagline. It's like Odisha FC, dark horse. Maybe it's the kit color as well, but I don't know. It's a tough one. Obviously, I did some work with them over the last 1.5 seasons, and I've always maintained this, and even when I was helping them out, was that you need 3 transfer windows sometimes to transform a club. Like if you've made a lot of bad signings and you've got a very imbalanced squad, it's not going to change in one fell swoop unless you get rid of everyone, pay everybody off, and start afresh. It's not going to happen because you've got people on longer term contracts. So it was a 3 transfer window rebuild, I would say. They've had 2. This is their 3rd transfer window now, which they've used to finally rebuild. So it should on paper be a lot better. The question mark is when you're rebuilding because it wasn't strong. And you look at, was this a lot of the players that, when Gamba was there, were signed, Indian players that you're looking to rebuild. So if you're bringing the same person back, are you going to make the same mistakes? Is a question. So, are you going back? Because normally you don't go back to ex-girlfriends and old football clubs. It's just a, unwritten rule. And so let's see, but people do change, and you do change your perception sometimes when you're looking at it from outside. Maybe even Gamba would have looked and said, okay, that was probably, now I know Indian football a lot better from 2 seasons of where we didn't perform very well. And looking at it as an external consultant, he would have seen it and seen that, okay, there are better players out there, and maybe this wasn't the best player. And using that example is like Vineet Wright. They had an opportunity. He was only on loan to Mumbai. They could have recalled him, and he was integral in the old Gamba plans to the way he played, but they chose not to keep him, and they let him extend his loan to Mumbai. So it does look like there's a change and shift, recognition that you've got the likes of Isaac and Toiba, who are far better players in that position and offer a lot more to the way they play. And Durand Cup, they went through the first opening stages all with clean sheets, which clean sheets in Odisha is not something that you'd normally associate. So that's a definite positive. But the strange thing is 2 of the goalkeepers that gave them those clean sheets, the likes of Kamal and Dylan are no longer with the club. So Dylan's been replaced by Amrinder, as you mentioned, and I think they brought a keeper from Rajasthan as well. So two keepers in, two keepers out after the Durand Cup. So that's a bit, strange to say the least. But when the agents, if I saw this tweet somewhere, someone talking about it, when the agent of the coach and the agent of the goalkeeper and the agent of certain players is the same, there is going to be this sort of merry-go-round in Indian football. I've seen it at some other clubs too. But that's, coaches do want certain players that fit their system, and they want the certain types of players. So that's not a major factor. I'd have question marks again about their defense, just looking at it. The last time they were around, when Carlos Delgado was playing for Delhi and later Odisha, probably you wouldn't classify him as one of the top 5 defenders in the league at that time. Has he significantly improved? Not sure. Who's partnering him? Narendra Gaylord looked as the weak link in the Durand Cup, as well as in some of the India games as well. I don't think he's that comfortable on the ball to play out from the back. And he didn't play that many games at Jamshedpur either last season. So little question marks there in that central defensive pairing. And then I think you go further into the midfield, they've improved in terms of some of the players they've brought in. You've lost some of the individualistic players that they had last season to get more sort of team and a bit more well-balanced players in midfield. So I think they'll definitely be tougher to beat by the looks of it, which I think if you're always tough to beat in this league, that's a great start. You don't have to be all free-flowing and great possession and build-up and etc. Because as long as you've got someone up front who can score, you can nick points in this league. And I think that's where Diego Mauricio, he doesn't offer much defensively. He doesn't really offer much in the build-up. But what he does do is he'll always nick a goal. So even when they lose 5-1 to Chennai, he scored that one. And at one point it was 1-1. It was level. He had equalised. And if you look at it when he played for Mumbai in the Champions League, AFC Champions League, he'd nick a goal here or there. And he's a good poacher. He's a good goal poacher. And
so why is it like Odisha let him go, then Mumbai got him, then Mumbai let him go? From what I understand, he was in and around the transfer window last year, but nobody really wanted to take him. If he's so good at scoring,
he's expensive. He doesn't, as I said, he doesn't really offer much apart from being a goal poacher. So you can almost say it's like the Brazilian version of Ishan Pandita, right? Gets you the goals, but overall game, not really much else in terms of it as a forward. Forward doesn't really offer much, but that's enough sometimes. If you, as a super sub or whatever, because they have signed another striker. So how Gamba is going to use him? Is he going to be an impact player, or is he going to start with him? Remains to be seen. But he does get goals. But the reason probably some teams didn't look at him is, do you want somebody who just scores you goals but you lose games? I mean, there's no point. Like I said, he might have played the other day. They lost 5-1. He got a goal. So his stats look good at the end of the season, but the team sometimes loses when such players play. So it's almost like Odafa towards the end of his career, where he'd get the goals, but the team didn't perform. So I think that's probably when you do the analysis of such players, when clubs do their homework very well nowadays, and they look at it and think it's not just about goals, it's about how many points do you get your team when you're playing, or how different do we play. So when you dig deeper and scratch the surface a bit more in the analysis, the cost, you shouldn't really equate his cost to goals. It's not like, all right, he's, let's say, $300,000 and he gets us 15 goals, so it's a pretty good return. It's 20,000 a goal. You should be looking at 300,000 to how many points you get when he plays, because that's the real business that you're in. So, whereas the agent will tell you the other side of the story, the goals to price ratio, and that's why you end up with that same merry-go-round, because it's the same agent, as I was talking about earlier, of that player. So.
Makes sense. Now the last team, I think we have covered everything else. Northeast United FC. I don't really have a lot to ask or say about them, so I'm just going to leave the floor to you, because I do feel like this team, I'm not really a big fan of how the team is run, to be completely honest. And that's not no disrespect, because the Highlanders, the fan group is doing a really excellent job. in teaching the Northeast states and some really interesting facts about them and stuff like that, because they sort of have the whole area as one, right? That's the whole point of Northeast United FC.
Yeah. So I think what I like about the way that run is they run very frugally and sensibly in terms of finances, and I think you've got to give them credit for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So they get new foreign players that a lot of people may not have seen in this league, and a lot of times people end up picking up those foreigners and signing. So if they're smart about it, they can make some transfer money off of those players. I think they did make a little bit of money with Dylan Fox. I think last year or 1.5 seasons ago, Deshaun Brown was an astute pickup for them. So they well in that market. I mean, you look at Ogbeche came into the league from Northeast. So did like Asamoah Gyan, Gallego. So their foreign player recruitment is exceptional. It's almost like other teams are saying like, okay, let's see who they sign and let's see if we can pick them up in December or next year. So I think you have to give them credit there. Indian players too. I mean, you look at, they go after players that a lot of people might ignore. And I like that. You know, they give the likes of a VP Suhair a chance and they give them a platform. You know, an Nintoys, Apuya, etc. So they come through that. Now it's tough because of the finance and the budget that they run on to retain those players. But you know, they punch above their weight, certainly with those players. I'm not too sure about the coach, but I think the coach obviously knows the technical director. So there's a little bit more synergy in that. So there is a longer term planning. You know, they're grinding out results. They beat Mirokas and Trows recently in some matches. And, you know, those are tough. The I-League teams, not by no means pushover. So they seem a little bit better prepared this year going into the league than that. So even though they didn't play the Durand Cup and they played it with the kids, the first team actually looks a bit structured. They've been playing together. No superstars, but I think sometimes those are the teams that you can't sort of discount. Whilst I say that, I don't think they'll make the top 6. But if they can get momentum, which would be great because then you start seeing crowds coming back to the stadium in Guwahati, then that always becomes a very, very tough place to go and get results. So that's where, you know, you'd like to see every team do well. You don't want to see teams which are significantly weaker than the other teams over there, but to cause an imbalance in the league. But you want to see games, and I think, you know, we've seen an ISL team which spent big compared to some of the I-League teams with significant. So by the same token, not so marquee Indian players, I still think they'll be able to compete.
Yeah, when I said the way they run, I didn't mean the recruitment. I just meant few decisions and generally how they run in the background. I'm not a big fan of that. But Gallego is going to be a big loss. I thought he was one of the best players that we've seen in the league. Unfortunately, with the really, really bad injury that he's had. I wish him all the best. I really did wish that he had another chance to play here, but not to be. So
he's playing actively. So I think maybe somebody in the January window, when the panic kicks in the January transfer window, you know, he'd probably be top on the shopping list of a lot of teams.
Let's hope so, because the panic is going to kick in regardless. So let's hope that yeah.
There's no relegation, but panic will still kick in.
Yeah, so, absolutely. So let's see. So now we have done all the teams. So I'm going to ask you a few other things. We can both give our opinions on that. So I want you to tell me one player that you are looking forward to watching play.
Indian or foreign?
Whichever.
Okay. I'm going to throw one complete curveball right out of left field is Ayush Chetri.
Interesting.
Of FC Goa, yes.
Yeah. You've seen him already, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen him a couple of times. Yeah, I mean that's the beauty. Like, fortunate about being in Goa, you get to see a lot more football. I mean, there's a lot of football already, and we're only in, you know, October's just started, and the league hasn't even started. But there's so much teams are coming here for pre-season, and teams are playing matches. I think he's exciting to watch. I like players like that, and young Indian talent coming through. I won't hype him up too much because I've got a bad track record with this. I think a few years ago I said something. You know, I expected one of the other young players coming through at FC Goa to do really well. And
But you got Apuya, right? So
yeah, you get them right more often than you get them wrong. But sometimes I think it puts pressure on the kids because obviously nowadays social media, someone says this and then someone else will pick it up and then mention it again on TV, and then players sometimes read into it and start to believe their own hype. It's like, look, you've got potential, but you got to still do it on the field, and it's not. We had that with the Nemils last season. We've had it with a couple of other boys at a lot of these clubs. So he's definitely one of the midfielders that I'm looking forward to. I think I'm hoping Shivasakti gets more games at BFC.
He was going to be my pick.
And I think defensively, looking forward to seeing Anwar having a full season in the ISL, because I think just looking at it I always try and look at it from the bigger perspective, which is Indian football and Indian national team. You need centre backs, so you need somebody coming through, and if he can have a good season, that's a huge positive. In midfield, I think Toiba is one of those who's probably knocking on the national team door without making too much noise. He offers you that kind of Suresh qualities in midfield for which teams need in this league. So he's another one. So those would be the sort of 3 or 4 players, young players, that I would be looking out for.
For me, it is Shivashakti, just because I recently did an interview with him, and he said he knows that he has 10 minutes. And it's at 10 minutes that he's got to shine in. And that's how he did it in the Durand Cup. He did that in the AFC Cup last year, I guess. And he's very conscious of what he can achieve, because he's a very slight guy. He's not a physically imposing player. So it's going to be interesting to see how they use him. He seems to have a good relationship with the front line. I want to see if they can do it properly. Prince Ibarra is also there, so you really don't know how much time he's going to get. But let's see how that goes. The other one is who is a player that you have who you think has a lot to prove this year? And I'll say this with the caveat that I personally look at Sandesh Zingan. Again, he's come for a big contract. Didn't have the greatest of season last year. Not the greatest of performance of the national team also this year. Asia Cup is coming. I don't know. Hopefully in June next year, something. Hopefully that's when it comes. So I think he's got to have a big season this year.
Probably. I mean, I'm not going to dwell too much on it because I think enough has been said by people about his performances for club and national team. But he's coming back from injury.
Yeah, so he has to do it.
He's picked up silverware. I think the only place he's ever picked up silverware is at BFC. So I think somehow BFC gets the best out of him, and he performs best at that stage. Because maybe he doesn't get the limelight that he gets somewhere else. At the other clubs, there is he's the marquee Indian player of that club, and here he isn't. He's probably not even through amongst the Indian players. So there may be that lack of limelight probably makes him focus a bit more on his game. But speaking of players who exactly in the same kind of ilk, I think Amrinder is one that has a lot to prove, because you've gone from being the most expensive Indian signing in terms of long-term contract, big money move, etc. And it just didn't work for him there. And now you move to a club where, as a goalkeeper, you're going to get a lot of action, which is not necessarily a good thing, but sometimes the way the ISL stats are, it's good for you, because you'll suddenly come up with the most saves, and you'll be top of the team. Just like the goal scorers and the assists are top of the charts, you the most saves, you'll be up there, because you will get a lot of those opportunities. But as the Durand Cup showed, Odisha can keep clean sheets, and so if he can get those clean sheets and starts putting in the performances, I think he can go on to show people why he's still regarded as top 2 goalkeepers in Indian football. So I think there's a lot for him to prove in that position. And I think if you look at the national team performance recently, there's a lot of positions open for players to sort of stake a claim. So whether it's like a Ritwik Das, can you cement yourself now as an established ISL player? Can Farouk's come back in? Can Roland's come back and start saying, listen, you guys might have forgotten about me because I was injured, but I'm a national team starter. Can Ritwik knock on the door and say, listen, maybe Udanta's time is up. I can bring more to the table in terms of going forward, but they've also got to give defensively the kind of stability that the Udantas and Nashiks have always given to the national team when you better quality opposition. So there's spots up for grab because national team games are there, and there are certain players who are on their way on the decline. Some are getting slightly older, so there's a lot of opportunities and doors opening.
Yeah. Give me one crazy prediction, which is unlikely to be true, but there is an outside chance that it can be true. Don't say top 6 because, like you mentioned, statistically, that's an easy prediction nowadays.
All right, well, crazy prediction: a coach will get sacked before Christmas.
Wow.
Not going to happen. You said something that's not likely to happen, so there you go.
And this is nothing to do with any of the players. It's something that I was thinking about earlier. The way maybe I'm in my own bubble here, but I just don't think there is enough hype about ISL this season. And I thought I didn't think there was enough last year, but it built as the season went. The year before there was a lot of hype, but it looks like this year there should be more considering people are coming back to the stadium. It's going to be home and away. Everything's going back to normal. You're looking at a longer season overall, etc., etc. It's going to be a lot of changes, but it just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like there is a lot of hype. Maybe it's there in the pockets where, like in Kerala and stuff like that, but overall, I don't see it that much. You don't have to agree or disagree. I'm just making a statement.
No, it's a fair and valid point. Like I was driving into work today, and I heard on the radio, I heard an FC Go advert for games being back, and I thought that's a bit strange because they actually don't have games for the next month, home games, but they're trying to build up the hype, so which is good. Like clubs are doing it, but the funny thing is, as I was listening to that ad, as I was driving up the highway, I could see posters on the side of the highway which caught my eye, and they're for the Under-17 Women's World Cup. So I think in Goa, because the Under-17 Women's World Cup is happening, there's a bit of advertising for that, and there's a bit of focus on that. And even from an AFF point of view, because it's a marquee event, there is a little bit of even media coverage, whether it's local newspapers, the Indian women's team performance, because the women's team now getting the chance to do what the boys did, which is play in a top-flight tournament because we're hosting it. So there is a little bit of shift of focus, maybe on eyeballs, media coverage, etc. on that. Then obviously the big thing is you've got the ISL happening in the same year as the World Cup, which is happening in the winter. So you are going to start looking, as a football fan, you're consuming a lot of Premier Leagues that started, you're consuming that, you're consuming obviously the build-ups to the World Cups happening as well. So maybe conscious focus of not to, I don't know, overkill it. But I think
it makes sense. It does make sense because
it's one of those things. It's almost like it's a slow-moving thing that gathers momentum. No one really. I think the last couple of years, because the bubble and there was not enough sport, you looked forward to the start of it. Whereas now, I think Durand Cup was exciting. I actually enjoyed watching the Durand Cup. You had, football to watch. You had, some AFC Cups. But I think sometimes even in the mind of people, AFC Cup disappointment of ATK Mohun Bagan, then disappointment of the national team's performance against Vietnam. You can sometimes cause that sort of, negativity around it. But as a first game, look, as soon as Kerala plays against East Bengal, big fans in the crowd, you're going to start, it whets your appetite for good football. And then you have a couple of good games, like at the start of the season. Last year you had that, where you had some 5-goal thrillers and you had some real, really, really good games at the start of the season. And once that happens, you start getting into the momentum, and then you start seeing a little bit more of each team. And I think that's going to be exciting. And I'm looking forward to fans at the stadium. It's to see people at Kantirva, to see people at the Kolkata game, I think, and they're not doing the derby very early. They're leaving it for, I think, till the 29th or something. So that's going to be good. There's a little bit of change in the way the formats are. So it should be an exciting season. It's almost in a way it's better that it starts gradually and then ends with a bang, rather than starts with a bang and then peters out. So
absolutely, and I do agree with the thing, because as a journalist, right, there were so many big ticket events this year and last year with the Olympics, and now there could have been an Asian Games also, which is cancelled. So even we are just getting burned out, and there's going to be a Cricket World Cup now, the Football World Cup after. all the Grand Slams and all the things. Federer retired, blah blah blah. Like we didn't do many shows for a while because Duran Cup. Because I was
Yeah.
traveling, I was in Guwahati, I was in Imphal and stuff like that, and there was also other people who didn't have enough time to watch enough games so that we could have like a proper show. Because I think there is just too much sport in general now. It's and especially for somebody if you are interested in multiple sports, it's going to be really difficult to keep the same level of motivation. You're going to switch off at some point.
And another thing, like, which we've forgotten, and the good thing we've forgotten in a way, is 2 months ago we were banned from football. So
Yeah, we did.
you think about also, there's been all that chatter with all what's going on whether social media, this, that, and the other. At that point, would foreign players be playing in the ISL, etc. And then there's a lot of change happening. So in a way, it's good that we've all forgotten about that and then just getting on with normal, with normalcy, rather than having that the hangover from that, as I'd say. Or maybe it is, there's still a bit of a delayed hangover because of what's happening there, and with uncertainty with AFF. Nobody knows. Like, we've got a schedule out for the ISL, which we don't have a schedule for the I-League yet. There's no clarity on when the second division will start. So there's a lot of uncertainty still in Indian football. So that could also be one of the reasons why.
But those have always been there, no? The second division and the I-League not knowing when they're starting and all of that.
Yeah, but there's changes now. Your expectations are different. Before you would say, that was the norm and you expected. Now there is expectation that things will be different. They're putting in new rules like no foreign players and this, that. So it's in a state of flux, I would say.
Yeah, let's hope. Like you said, last year also it built slowly. So let's hope. I think a lot of it has to do with how good Kerala was doing as well. So let's hope this year also it builds slowly and it leads a crescendo at the end, because I do think it would be great if we had a great end of the season and then went on to the Asian Cup. Provided, I still don't know if it's happening next year because we don't know who's the host and all that stuff. So I hope you build down to that and then go straight to the Asian Cup. A lot of excitement, and that could be a great end to the season, let's say.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, as I said, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Brad. This is our quick fire sort of preview, and we'll do more shows and more in-depth analysis. And the Brad and I will be back with our usual show. Both of us have been quite busy with different things. We have not been able to make it work, but we'll get around to it. And it has to be an early morning thing also, so the coffee has to kick in. So, yeah.
Okay. Look forward to we'll do it some maybe a mid-season review just before the around the Christmas break. Let's see if any predictions are right by then.
Absolutely.
Okay. Cool, Sandeep.
Yeah.